And we know one of Doge's early targets, of course, USAID, already taking down that sign on the federal building, putting what the White House calls wasteful and dangerous spending on blast. The administration says some of that bad spending includes DEI programs in countries like Serbia, Ireland, Colombia, and Peru. But after fact-checking, NewsNation found many of these actually came from the State Department. The biggest spending from USAID actually went to Ukraine with $16.6 billion, and then there was $3.3 billion that went to Israel. Elon Musk's Doge taking USAID to the chopping block, but is it worth it? Well, according to one USAID whistleblower, the answer is yes. And he is joining us live now on News Nation. Dr. Cohen is a board-certified preventive medicine physician and a U.S. Army veteran and joins us now. I really appreciate you making the time tonight.
Thanks, Natasha.
I appreciate your insight here specifically because you worked at USAID since 2016 as a civil servant and contractor. You said in an article, quote, "It would be fair to say USAID is a baby suffering in filthy bathwater that hasn't been cleaned for decades." Can you explain these headlines? What do you mean by that?
Well, I want to emphasize the baby part of this because USAID really does do some great work, and I believe in that mission. And I'm speaking out because of the good colleagues who I worked with who do incredible work and often have to fight against a sclerotic bureaucracy that has grown over 6 decades, as many bureaucracies have. And we were frequently frustrated as we attempted to do USAID's very valuable mission of reducing poverty, reducing disease, often by very long delays, sometimes by a system that is overburdened with regulation. It was testified last week on the Hill that there are 7 layers of oversight that often leads to bean counting, and therefore reform is needed. And Elon Musk and his team are not totally wrong about that. But in the process, they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, firing lots of good employees. I would add, such as myself. I was among those who were laid off last week. And we do a lot of good work, and it's a real shame. And there are other ways to do this reform.
Okay, so that's fascinating because right here on News Nation, our own Mills Hayes was actually reporting about the ripple effects of these cuts. And, you know, the United Nations Aid Agency, for example, warning more than 6 million people could die from HIV/AIDS in the next 4 years if the U.S. halts its global funding for HIV prevention and treatment programs. I assume that is probably one of the programs that you're concerned about, one of the many. Where were some of the wasteful taxpayer dollars going?
Sure. So it wasn't so much wasteful dollars. A lot of the dollars were targeted at a good place. It was the delay. It was the inefficiency. A lot of times the procurements would take longer than a year. I once had a former boss say, all of our partners complain that we're, quote, slow as molasses. And so when I was there at USAID, I was elevated to be the deputy chief of staff, and I immediately observed the few problematic employees who were often responsible, often in positions of power, who, by the way, are still there. They were not included in Musk's cuts. And so I attempted to combat their delays. And ultimately, I often had to clean up their mess, as I detail in my op-ed. And instead of being appreciative that we fixed problems, I was severely retaliated against for my disclosures of gross mismanagement. And it is those problematic employees that really damage the mission of USAID and hurt our dollars' ability to go as far as they need to go. Where it's spent well, for example, on those HIV programs, I could cite a number of statistics. My favorite one is that up to 7 million children born to HIV positive mothers have been born HIV negative because they got drugs during pregnancy, often funded by HIV, an incredible thing. And we need to do more of that sort of thing and less of the bean counting and bureaucracy that slows down all the good work of my former colleagues.
I hear it. All right, we appreciate it. Dr. Rob Cohen, a former USAID employee and a U.S. Army veteran, appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.